Thank you guys so much for having us. And thank you for Pam for inviting me. What she didn't tell you guys is that I actually live in Florida, where it's not minus whatever it is in this part of the world. And she said, you can do this via Zoom. And I said, no, I'm coming to St. Rose. I want to be here in person. And our company, Alltech, is one of the top 10 feed companies and animal health companies, non-pharmaceutical, globally. But we have a very, very strong commitment to North America. We have our headquarters is in Lexington, Kentucky, and we have not just one, but we have 3 regional offices in Canada, one in Winnipeg, one in Calgary, and one in Ontario. So we're very committed to the Canadian livestock industry. And with that being said, we are very committed to produce solutions that is good for the animal, the environment, and ultimately for the consumer as well. And that is why our owner had just been on this mission to prove to the general public that actually our beef producers, they are stewards of the land. They are trying their very best to feed a growing population while doing it in the most efficient and environmental friendly way as possible. So that is really the premise of why he put his own capital investment into producing this documentary, is to really educate those of our friends and family members that does not understand the impact agriculture actually have on our food security and a positive impact on the environment as well. So what I want to talk to you guys today is how can we actually build our beef herd and be profitable beef producers? Because in the end of the day, if we produce meat in an efficient way, we are going to be more profitable. And if we are more efficient, our production efficiencies increase, guess what? We are going to have a better sustainability impact. Our carbon footprint is going to be much smaller. So in the grand scheme of things, being a better, more efficient producer is going to make you more profitable, but it's going to have a positive impact on the environment as well. So as beef producers, if we look at key factors that affect overall profitability on the cow-calf ranch, there are so many things that can have an impact, right? Herd health, feed costs, genetics, market prices, pasture quality, land management, efficient or best management practices. But one of the things that you have probably the most control over is your reproductive efficiency. Because the more pounds or kilos of beef you wean per cow, per exposed cow, is going to have a direct impact on the dollars you get paid at the end of the day, right? So if we truly want to improve our production efficiencies and our profitability, we really need to take a hard look at what can we do to improve our reproductive efficiency on herd. And there is a lot of work that actually look at the economic impacts of improving production efficiency, especially reproductive efficiency. So just napkin math, we can look at the amount of pounds that we sell at weaning, but are we taking into consideration over total exposed number of cows on our farm? And what does it mean if we can improve this by 1 or 3 or 5%? What is the economical impact? So reproductive efficiency is really defined as the proportion of total eligible cows to be bred that become pregnant during a cycle. And it's determined by calving to conception interval. So as beef producers, we should really focus on increasing reproductive efficiency as a key driver for that economic efficiency or profitability. And that, how many cows you get bred totally is going to have a significant impact on profitability. But how many cows you get bred in that first 21 days versus second or third 21 days is also going to have an impact on what? Your weaning weights, right? So the more cows you get bred and the heavier the calf at weaning is going to have direct impact on what you get paid ultimately. So all of these are very much impacted by genetics, management practices, but meeting nutritional requirements and strategic supplementation. In this area, do you guys have any known mineral deficiencies or nutritional deficiencies that you know of? Copper? What is copper very important to? Reproductive efficiency, estrous cycle. Anything else? Selenium maybe? Yeah? All of these trace elements as part of a nutrition program can have a direct impact if you supplement or not supplement on meeting that cow's nutritional requirement. And that ultimately is going to impact her reproductive efficiency. So this is actually some examples from an extension publication in the Southeast United States, and it's a little bit older, but I want you to take a look at it. And it's a little bit hard to read, but if we think about it, if you have a percentage calf crop of 85% and you wean on average a 500-pound calf, that means you really only weaned on average 425 pounds per exposed cow, right? If you increase your percentage calf crop to 90%, so a 5% improvement in reproductive efficiency, and you still wean on average a 500-pound calf, now in terms of total exposed cows, because there is what, or if we look at 90, there's 10 cows out of every 100 that did not calf, right? Now you wean on average only 450 pounds per exposed female. So you can see how important it is to move up your calving percentage to get as many cows bred. So if we look at this looks at the dollars returned per cow. These are older numbers, but it just demonstrates the example. So if you wean on average a 500-pound calf at an 85% calving crop, that would put, in those days, in whatever the market prices were worth in 2011, it puts $463 in your pocket. Now, if you improve, just on weaning weights, if you improve that percentage calf crop to 90, now it's a difference of over $28 per cow. So it's extremely important not just to look at weaning weights at the end of your season, but look at weaning weight expressed per exposed female. And that's going to account for your open cows. So we want to really increase the number of cows we actually get bred and the number of cows we get bred within those first 21 days. Yes, sir.
Back to your mineral deficiency that we have in different areas. Season-wise, because we got 4 seasons here, does that deficiency go through the whole year or at particular times?
Mineral deficiencies is going to be very much based on what the cattle is grazing, right? And your mineral status of your forages or your corn stalks or your barley is going to depend on your soil trace mineral status. Where seasonality comes into play is if you have older mature foragers or corn stalks versus the whole plant. That's where you're going to see more of a seasonality impact. And also certain type of grass species, certain type of grain crops have different capacities for absorbing the trace mineral out of the soil and incorporate it into the plant proteins. So typically, to counter for the potential low trace mineral status, especially where you have known trace mineral status from the soil and in the plants, is to do a supplementation program. Because it gives you a safety net in case you have any deficiencies, but it also accounts for variability between different grass crops or crops that you might graze, like corn stalks or barley or whatever it is. But if you're in an area where you have a known copper deficiency, typically we see lower zinc and selenium in those areas as well. So you really want to look at supplementing most of your trace minerals and then depending on your macros as well. So can we actually use nutritional strategies to have an impact on reproductive efficiency. And I think this is very important because a lot of times when you buy replacement heifers, we typically just look at genetics, right? But we should look at overall feeding programs and how we can complement our cows to perform to their genetic potential by feeding them a really good trace mineral program, protein and energy to fulfill their requirements so that they can actually perform at their genetic potential. So trace minerals is very, very important for reproductive efficiency because they are actually directly involved in synthesis of certain reproductive hormones. So typically, if we have a cow that is in poor copper status, what do we see? We see anestrus, or she has difficulty cycling. So that is why we really need to address some of these efficiencies. We also see that trace minerals are directly involved in improvement of the uterine environment. So a lot of times, if our cows are in poor trace mineral status, we would potentially see early embryonic losses. So you might think that the cow did not get bred in that first 21 days. Now she get bred in the third cycle, but she might have been pregnant, but were not in adequate trace mineral status, so she might have lost that pregnancy. And that can typically be traced back to poor or suboptimal trace mineral status. So this is why we supplement. I didn't have an example of the typical grains and forages that you guys graze up here, but what I looked at was wheatgrass, orchard grass, timothy meadow, and brome. And what you can see is here is the cow's actual requirement for trace elements, so copper, manganese, zinc, and selenium. But if you look at these typical forages that we have in the western United States, they are all deficient. So that is why we have to supplement them with a proper trace mineral program. It is actually to bridge that gap between her requirement and what the forage would provide to her. But what a lot of people don't talk about is that the form of the trace mineral, that how we supplement her, the trace mineral source, is actually even more important than the form. Than the amount. And when we talk about trace mineral form, we typically refer to inorganic trace minerals or organic trace minerals. Inorganic trace minerals, if you look at the back of your mineral program, your supplement, and you see something like oxide or copper sulfate or a zinc sulfate or a chloride, that means you are supplementing the animal with an inorganic form of the trace mineral. Inorganic trace minerals are typically byproducts from other industrial processes like mining. So in nature, what we see is that the plant, so the grass or the forage or the crop, takes out the minerals out of the soil, they incorporate it into the plant proteins, and that is the form the animal is adapted to utilize the trace mineral in, right? Inorganics, as I said, are typically byproducts. Don't worry, he's fine. This is our future right there, right? It's glad to see children at our ag meetings. So if we have a crop, it takes out the mineral out of the soil. The animal is actually adapted to utilize and fulfill its requirements through that. Now, if we give it in the inorganic form, we're skipping a step, right? Because it's a mining product. So that's why typically if we feed oxides or sulfates, we're feeding it at extremely high levels, but we still see a lot of it being excreted and not utilized by the animal. They just are not adapted to utilize it as effectively. When we talk about organic trace minerals, it's not that it is organically certified. It just means that we take that metal ion and we bind it to a carbon compound. So an amino acid or a sugar or a peptide, a small protein. And the reason we do it is to make it closer to the form animals would find it in nature. So when we talk about trace minerals, you always hear, oh, organic trace minerals are so much more bioavailable than inorganics. And bioavailable just means that the animal can actually utilize these much better than they can in organic. So when you are in an area like yourselves where you have copper and zinc and selenium deficiencies, it will be very beneficial for your animals to actually be supplemented with organic trace minerals, because they are going to get so much more out of it than from the inorganic form. Better absorption, better availability, better retention, better transfer from cow to calf. Under the category of organic trace minerals, there's also a lot of different brands. For example, at Alltech, our brand is called Bioplexus, and our selenium, organic selenium, is called Cellplex. And what we do with these products is we produce it naturally as close to the form it would be in nature to ensure that it is of the highest bioavailability, so that it actually supports the cow's optimum trace mineral status and that she can actually retain these trace minerals into tissues so that she can transfer it to her calf via passive transfer and via colostrum and milk. So what we really do is really try to help the higher nutrient needs to help that cow produce as close to genetic potential as possible. So when we think of trace minerals, back in the day, we really just think of it in terms of preventing a deficiency, right? For example, selenium. What was the major... Is there sheep in this area? A little bit? Typically, if people talk about a selenium deficiency, what comes to mind? White muscle disease, right? So in the past, all that we could think about selenium was we need to feed selenium to prevent white muscle disease. But today, we know that trace minerals, especially selenium, is a crucial and essential part of the immune system, not just for our animals, for ourselves as well. And that the trace mineral status can have a tremendous impact on growth rates, on DNA synthesis, on reproductive efficiency through hormone synthesis. So instead of just when you go to the store and you want to buy a proper trace mineral supplementation program for your cows, it comes down to a single question. Are you buying that mineral to just prevent a deficiency, so maybe the most economical product that's out there, or are you going to look to do something different where you really want to supply her for optimized reproductive efficiency through giving her minerals in the organic form to help support hormone synthesis, tissue reserve, mineral status, and transfer to her calf? So with organic trace minerals, if we go back to the importance of reproductive efficiency, what we have seen in all the research is that if you switch from inorganic trace minerals to organic trace minerals such as Bioplex and Cellplex, we have seen that you can reduce days to first service, you can decrease days open, and you can actually increase pregnancy rates. And these are in all different studies. And we can also see that you can improve ovarian activity. You can help your cattle reach puberty earlier estrus, which means they can get bred earlier, and you can actually decrease early embryonic mortalities just by switching out inorganic copper, zinc, manganese, and selenium with the organic, more bioavailable forms. So with the traditional inorganic trace mineral programs, we are doing a good job in preventing clinical and subclinical deficiency symptoms. We are supplementing enough to overcome deficiencies. But for optimized immunity and optimized fertility, this is the big difference between an inorganic program and an organic trace mineral program. So I wanted to show you a couple of examples where we've actually worked with herds and switched them from high levels of inorganic trace minerals to lower levels, because it's more bioavailable, right, of Bioplex and Cellplex, and how we've actually had a positive impact on repro numbers as well as weight gain, which actually had a positive impact on profitability for the producers as well. So we've worked with several universities. The studies I'm going to show you was out of Florida. where we've actually had a herd that performed very well. They were at 92% conception rate on the inorganic trace mineral program. So we fed the second group of cows, we fed them the program with Bioplex and Cellplex, and we were actually able to take them from 92.6 to 95.3. So an additional 2.7% improvement in pregnancy percent. And that is quite significant if you think that for every 100 cows, if you can get 3 more calves, what is a calf worth today? $1,600? $2,000? Yes.
That's Canadian dollars.
Canadian dollars. But it is pretty impressive that by making an upfront change in your nutritional program, if you look at the numbers and you consider what a calf is worth or 10 pounds extra weaning weight, it can have a significant return on your bottom line. So what we've also seen in this study is not only did we had a positive impact on reproductive rates, we actually also impacted the 205 adjusted weaning weights. And on average, these cows that were supplemented with the Bioplex and Cellplex, they weaned on average 25 pounds more, heavier calves at weaning. And the reason is, if your cow is in proper trace mineral status, she's going to be able to transfer some of that to her calf via colostrum and milk. If she's not in optimum copper, zinc, and selenium status, guess what? Her calf is going to get born deficient. So, especially if you retain heifers, you want to think about the impact you have on your overall herd health and longevity. So what we always say is a healthy start is key to establishing calf health. If you get a poor, unthrifty calf, guess what? It never really recovers, right? It always just kind of lags behind. So in this study, they also look at colostrum immunoglobulin levels. And what they've seen is that for calves that came from cows that were supplemented with Bioplex and Cellplex, they had higher colostrum immunoglobulin levels at 12 hours after they were born and at 24 hours. And then, if you look at IgA levels, there was a big difference for these calves from cows that were supplemented. So all of this is the calf, this was the colostrum, so the immunoglobulins in colostrum, and this were actually measured in the calf blood serum levels. So it had a direct impact, the cow's trace mineral status on her calf's trace mineral status and immunoglobulin levels as well. But what was pretty impressive is look at 30 days. The calves from cows that were supplemented with the Bioplex and Cellplex had much higher IgG levels even 30 days later after they were born. So they actually maintain that higher level of immunity. And when is typically the period when calves are most susceptible to challenges? The first 3 weeks. The reason being, they have not developed their own immune system. They're relying on mom. So if you can give them this head start, you can be sure that they're probably going to be healthier, gain better, and be able to withstand some challenges much better than their peers who is not in higher immune status. And once again, what we've seen is these calves from cows that were supplemented with Bioplex and Cellplex, they weighed at weaning approximately 20 pounds heavier, which at $3 a pound is about $84 more per calf. And this is really a reflection of that calf is in better immune status, they are healthier, they're going to grow better. So back to reproductive efficiency. If we think about trace minerals and its impact on hormone synthesis, copper and zinc regulate progesterone production. What does progesterone do? It establishes and maintains pregnancy. So very, very important. Manganese plays an important role because it's required to synthesize estrogen, progesterone, even testosterone. So let's not forget about the impact of proper nutritional programs on our bulls as well. And then if you see, for example, any fluctuations in copper, if your cow is in better copper status postpartum, so after she calf, that can have an impact or lead to a reduction in days to estrus. So fewer days to first or to her next service, fewer days open. We've done a study with the University of Kentucky where all we've done is take out the inorganic selenium and we supplement it with 50% inorganic and 50% of Salplex. And what we have seen is that these heifers that was fed the Salplex actually had over 800 different transcripts were triggered on gene level in the corpus luteum. And the corpus luteum weight and diameter were improved just by switching out inorganic selenium with Salplex, with organic selenium. And this is extremely important because progesterone is produced in the corpus luteum. And progesterone are closely associated with conception rates and early embryonic development. So once again, just by making a simple switch from inorganic to organic selenium. We've done quite a bit of work with purebred operations where they do embryo work. And what we've seen is even if you feed Bioplex and Salplex at lower levels, we've actually seen increased number of oocytes, increased number of viable oocytes, and increase in number of cleavagens, which is an indicator of high-quality embryos. And then this was done right here in Guelph, not right here in Guelph, but in Canada at the University in Guelph, where we've actually looked at reproductive efficiency in dairy cows. And I know we are beef producers, but this was very interesting because what they did was compare two groups of dairy cows. One received the inorganic trace minerals and one Bioplex and Salplex. Everything else, protein and energy needs were exactly the same. And what did we see? We see that the cows supplemented with Bioplex and Salplex basically returned to estrus much faster than those that was supplemented with the inorganic trace minerals. So that goes back to the impact of trace mineral status and hormone synthesis. And what we've also seen is when we took the conceptuses of these cows, that over 589 different expressed genes, just with a difference in inorganic versus the Bioplex and the Salplex. So don't underestimate the impact nutritional programs can have on your herd's reproductive efficiency and health. It's tremendous, especially if you are in an area with known deficiencies. What we've also seen from these cows in Guelph, at the University of Guelph, is that actually if you take these embryos or conceptuses from these cows that were supplemented with Bioplex and Salplex, these embryos had superior mitochondrial activity, increased energy production, increased protein synthesis, and lower levels of free radicals. So basically, these embryos were of much higher quality. So that also makes sense to why we might not lose them in early pregnancy as well. So fetal programming and heifer development. That is such an interesting topic. And there is a lot of studies now that look at the impact on what you're feeding your cow. How does that impact the lifetime performance of her progeny, right? There is studies that has looked at protein and energy supplementation of the cow and how that can actually impact carcass weight in feedlots. So there's definitely an impact. With trace minerals, it's not different. Think about it. With 75% of the calf fetus growth during the last 2 months of gestation, calf nutrient requirements are set very low for early gestation period. So typically, what do we do on the farm? When do we typically supplement our cows? We tend to focus on the last 90 days, right before calving, right? Because that calf has higher needs. It's growing faster and bigger. But your placenta growth is set during the early phase of fetal development. The placenta is one of the major regulators of fetal growth. And the majority, especially of your sexual organs, of that embryo or that developing calf, guess when that develops? During early gestation. So if we're not taking care of our cows during early gestation, and we're only focused on late gestation, we're potentially missing out an opportunity to influence reproductive efficiency in our animals later in life. So we've done several studies in beef and dairy where we looked at the impact of trace minerals, so inorganic versus organic sources, on fetal programming. And basically what we've done is we took Angus cows and Brangus cows because we wanted to see if there's a breed difference, and we divided them. We fed half of them inorganic minerals and half of them organic minerals, Bioplex and Cellplex, at lower levels. Then what we did is we started these cows 90 days prior to calving. So after 90 days they calved. We took those heifer calves and we called them the first or year one heifer calves. Then we measured their performance. But then we continued these cows. We continued them on the mineral program. And when they calved again, we took those heifer calves and we called them year two heifer calves. So the difference between year one heifer calves and year two heifer calves is that year one's heifer calves were only exposed to the trace mineral program for 90 days in utero, and the year two were exposed to these two different programs from conception onwards, right? So we wanted to see the impact of the maternal trace mineral nutrition on the calf. What we have seen, regardless 90 days or throughout the entire period, is that heifer calves from cows supplemented with the organic trace minerals had better body condition score, they had higher average daily gains, and what I'm not showing you here, but we also saw better reproductive tract scores in these heifers. But what was very interesting is if you take those heifers that were supplemented with Bioplex and Cellplex in utero, the first group, year one, they reached puberty 9 days earlier and confirmed pregnant 8 days earlier than the inorganic calves. But if you supplemented these cows from conception onwards, their heifer calves actually reached puberty 41 days earlier and confirmed pregnant 18 days earlier than the inorganic heifers, the heifers from the inorganic cows. That is a great example of the impact of trace mineral source via maternal nutrition on future performance of your heifer calves. And why do we think we have this impact? Heartbeat starts at 21 days, or it's apparent at 21 days. But look at this. Ovarian development begins by days 50 to 60 of gestation. Another important event for females is that basically gonadal development starts at 80 days in gestation, right, of that embryo. So that's when her primordial follicles will be formed, and what that heifer calf gets born with in terms of follicles is all the follicles she will have for her entire lifetime. It's the same with humans. So maternal nutrition is extremely important, and maternal nutrition early in gestation is extremely important for reproductive efficiency of that calf. So here you can see we typically focus on supplementation here, but a lot of sexual organ development that can be impacted by fetal programming is earlier on in the gestation period. So why is it important if you're going to do replacement heifers? Why is it important to have or to boost puberty attainment? Why do you want your heifer calves to reach puberty earlier? There's a lot of work by universities that show heifers that get pregnant in the first 21 days of their first breeding season tend to have higher pregnancy rates for the first 6 calving seasons. Remember the impact of moving your calving percentage from 80 to 85, 85 to 90. Direct impact on your profitability. Also, heifers that calf in the first 21 days of their first calving season weaned heavier calves in each of their first 6 calving seasons. 6 years, pretty much, that you'll have that benefit. So every 21 days that a calf is born earlier means that calf would be 21 days heavier. And then you can multiply that by dollars per pound. Direct impact on your profitability. A lot of people put a lot of effort into their actual cows and the cow herd, but they forget about the bulls. Trace minerals are extremely important for male fertility as well. What we've seen is that semen is very high in polyunsaturated fatty acid, so they really are prone to lipid peroxidation. And you need antioxidant protection to make sure the sperm is not deficient and they will have morphological abnormalities. So supplementing them with organic trace minerals can have a positive impact, typically on semen quality, and even in other species, we've seen impact on semen volume as well. So I know in the US and Canada, we do not have as much pressure when it comes to the environmental aspect or sustainability. But we clearly hear about it more and more, as we alluded to with the World Without Cows. So I wanted to show you that how by doing something you're already doing, feeding a trace mineral program, but maybe switching from inorganic to organic, where you can improve your reproductive efficiency, what is the economical and sustainable impact that you can have in your herd? And these are the stories we need to tell those of our neighbors that does not see the positive impact of what we're doing. So I actually looked up Canada's 2030 beef sustainability goals. And the Canada Beef Association basically said that by 2030, they want to reduce emission intensity by 33%. On their website, they also give you guys a lot of guidelines on how they propose producers make these changes or have these net positive impacts. So if you look on the website, the first thing they say, if to help reach this goal of reducing greenhouse gas and carbon emissions and improve carbon sequestration, number one, reproductive efficiency, mineral programs, precision nutrition. So it is a known way to actually have a positive environmental impact. And what they say, their goals is, the Canadian industry said, they want to make sure they attain an average of 92% reproductive efficiency in the Canadian beef herd. So what I did was I looked at our research and I wanted to see how would that model out. If you get 1% more improvement in reproductive efficiency, what does that mean in terms of emission intensity? So first of all, if we get 1% improvement in pregnancy rate, and we use a 100-cow example, at $3 a pound, which is a little bit conservative by the sounds of the market today, one additional calf equivalent to $1,600, right? And if you model it, that will give you a 0.23% reduction in emission intensity. This is just taking into consideration an extra calf, not the additional weaning weights. If you have a 3% improvement in pregnancy rates, 3 calves is worth almost $5,000, and now you have 0.6% improvement in emission intensity. And if you have a higher improvement in pregnancy percentage, 9 calves, that is $14,000, and that almost gives you a 2% reduction in emission intensity.
I have a question on
Yes.
this. Why do you never use a slide when you use $3 a pound? Because if a calf is 25 pounds lighter, he's worth 10 cents more a pound. So it's not 3 times, it's not $75 difference, it's $17 difference in the calf.
So what I basically do is just usually look up the market price, and I say, okay, if you have a calf that is 500 pounds, and I multiply that by the price per pound, and then if I say you have a calf that is 520, I'll take that $20 times the additional. But I see where your math is going.
That's not the way the real world works. But pounds a lot of times has nothing to do with profit. Now,
No.
what it costs you to get to that level,
Yes,
you feed a mineral
yes.
that a lot of times you can go like a blueprint mineral, it's twice the
Yeah.
money as what we're feeding. Even if you lose $25 a pound of calf, you're still way ahead in profit.
Yes.
So
So typically,
why is that never in this stuff? They never show you the cost. You've got to show you the cost. If they don't show you the cost, it doesn't mean nothing. And that's a problem with our industry, grain or anything. Our pounds have went up like this
Yeah.
for crops and beef, and our profits have went down.
And I agree with you 100%. One of the reasons me personally don't show cost is because since I'm not from your area, even if I'm in Florida, the products, there's such variability that I honestly, Eric can tell you what a mineral program costs in this region. I can't. I can't tell
No,
you.
it's kind of that program where we're feeding is kind of double. And if you do the math, what's the slide, real world inputs, you actually make more money with the cheaper mineral. Now, I'm not saying don't feed mineral, like, we put in some organic forms, like the copper and sling, but organic and other stuff is inorganic, but it's half the price. And it's a company that sells both, all tech and other stuff.
What we've seen typically is, I'm just going to use an example. If an organic program, and it depends on a block or a tub, what's your protein and energy with these different programs. But let's just say the trace minerals are $10 more per cow. Then if you can improve one additional calf and you can have 20 more pounds, that is going to cover that $10.
But it's not $10, so we're talking from one program, next we're talking $30.
and
And like I say, $25 a pound, it's a 10 slide, it's $17.50 difference.
I agree with
Like
you.
profit is what matters. Like, we gotta look at profit, not yield and loss. That's the problem with our agriculture.
No, I agree with you 100%. And I think this is where, Eric, you must definitely weigh in. And I think this is where individual conversations can be really helpful, because half of the times we just look at tags and we don't know, we're not comparing a 2-ounce to a 4-ounce mineral, or we're not comparing is this higher protein or energy, or is the minerals, it might be 7,000 parts per million and this one is just 3,000, but it's different forms. So my personal reason why I usually don't go into cost is just I do not know the regional nuances. Eric?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things that I would consider. So A, I'm never going to play with your money. You guys are the producers, and at the end of the day, it's your pocket. I try to know the markets as best I can. Just out of curiosity, as an example, from a 500 to a 525 pound wean calf, like what would that mean? To take away the cost just to start, what would that be revenue-wise? That 25 pound, what would that equate to?
$17.50.
Yeah, the past few
On a
years
40
almost the
slide.
same. They're gonna be worth
Because-
almost the same.
because-
From 5 to 525.
Yeah. Because you get an extra 10 cents a pound.
Yeah, for sure.
Like down, okay, so you
Yes.
take that slide, with your math, you're getting an extra $75 a month. You're getting an extra $17.50 is what you're getting, but, and then you gotta show the extra cost of the chelated mineral. Like, I'm not against chelated, but when we give presentations to everyone, we have to look at
Absolutely.
the cost too. So you should say, on average, the cost of this mineral will cost you an extra $34 a pound.
Yeah.
So actually, you're losing extra, so maybe you should look at this.
So with my math, if I were to say $30 additional per cow, and you get one more extra calf, but you also get, let's say, on average, we see 20 pounds improvement, right? It will still, your ROI, your return, usually what I'll do, if I know the local numbers, is put return on investment, because that kind of covers it. Typically what we see is 4 to 1.
But then it costs you, because you said an extra 5%, you got an extra $28.50 per calf in herd. But you're up, what is blueprint mineral worth?
So
$55
this
a
is,
bag?
So this is where I'm gonna clarify. So I don't sell Blueprint. So
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I'm just using Blueprint.
For
But
sure.
Yeah.
You're
50.
going from 18 cents down to 9, right? So it's gonna cost you another $34. So you're better off to be down 5% to make an extra $6 per cow. That's where the costs have to be in here. It doesn't mean nothing, like production means
I-
nothing to do with profit. And we gotta focus on profit. Like that's the problem with the agricultural industry. All we hear is yield and cost. We gotta talk profit.
I 100% agree. The one thing I will just say to clarify, like what we do is like, so my job essentially is I sell to all of the feed companies, and so it's hard for me to speak on pricing because what Master feeds is mineral compared to New Rosedale, compared to Feedmax, compared to Trow. They might use our minerals at different levels, so it's really difficult for me to say. Like I don't actually sell a beef pellet or a premix, so I can't really speak to the pricing of individuals, companies, programs. Right, but what we can say is with the research that we've done, in sometimes in this market, sometimes in other markets, that we do see increased pregnancy rates, which gives us more calves, and calves worth a lot of money. I don't think any of us would disagree with that. I agree 100%.
Just at what it's spent. That's all.
100%.
With that extra
And-
cost, we get that
For sure.
extra production. That's all. I'm not saying minerals are bad, I think minerals.
And I think you have to look at where you are in your production, right? Are you looking for that additional 2% gain? Are you looking for 3% improvement in repro or gain? Do you think you can get better? What are you already doing, and maybe what can you do better? And I think micronutrients is one of those areas that we typically neglect. And yes, there is a cost to it, but it's not because organic trace minerals are so expensive. It's because inorganic trace minerals are so cheap, right? We're legitimately paying the mining industry to get rid of their waste, and we're putting it in our food supply, right? One of the benefits that we didn't even talk about is, which is very hard to quantify, is mineral and vitamin degradation. If you use a cheaper mineral with these high levels of sulfate, guess what? That sulfate can have reactivity with vitamins A, D, E, right? So you might pay cheaper for that mineral, but you're not getting everything that's necessarily on the label. Whereas with organic trace minerals, because it actually have to be physically produced, it's not a byproduct from another industrial process, you're not going to see some of that reactivity, so you're going to get more out of it. And a lot of times, if you're in an area where you have okay soil status, okay trace mineral status in your crops, yeah, a cheaper program might be able to get you where you want to be.
I think we've got to look at that one, so like, through plant diversity, we're bringing these minerals into the plants a lot better, we're not growing monocultures. So I think we gotta
There's
look at
so
our
many
feed
different
and
aspects.
look at blood tests on that.
But there is a lot of pressures on our industry that is environmental in certain areas, where guess what? In Europe, in pig and poultry production, sulfates, copper and zinc are regulated. So the amount of that you could put in their overall livestock feed there, especially in monogastrics, are regulated. Why? Because high levels of copper and zinc, oxide and sulfate cause what? Antimicrobial resistance. And there is a buildup in the soil and the water. So there is a long-term price to pay for some of the things we do at a lower cost today, right?
To a certain extent.
Yeah.
Like, so just for example, so I do all species, so pigs, for example, there's a really hard limit as to zinc, but any producer can just sign off and say, screw the limit, we'll go above it. So in nursery programs, like it's supposed to be like 750 ppm, but guys will just use 3,000, they just sign off on it. So pig, which is ridiculous, and I don't really understand why that's a thing, because it makes no sense. But in 2027 in Canada, basically they're going to say no to it. But in Europe, it's just really, it's a lot higher regulation, basically, than we have here.
There's kind of two questions. We're hearing more about like doing blood testing or liver biopsies to actually understand if you have a deficiency or not. one question I have is if anybody here has done any of that kind of stuff, I'd be really interested to talk to you about that and just how you went about that. But my question is on your studies, is that how you're looking at things, or is it or are they just based on lower conception rate? Because there can be all kinds of reasons for lower conception rate.
There can be. So we have to look at measurable or quantifiable results, right? So typically we have studies that looks at just immune status or parameters. We have studies that look at repro. We have studies that focus on weaning weights. For me, when we work with cow-calf producers, I like to look at conception rates and weaning weights. We have feedlot studies and receiving cattle studies where we actually looked at BRD. So what is the impact of optimum antioxidant and health status on BRD and disease challenge? So we've seen responses there. At the end of the day, I think if you know you're in an area where you might have marginal deficiency, where you're considering, should I do a copper or liver biopsy to see my animal's trace mineral status, you're already knowing deep down that there's potentially something's going on, right? It is very invasive. It can give you a very good idea of copper status. But there is a lot of ways you can take a preventative approach, right? You can have it naturally through a supplementation program, or you can make sure that your forages you graze are higher in certain trace minerals by supplementing the soil. Or you can say, my animals is deficient, now I have to take a preventative action, and I'm going to have to do shots. But that is a Band-Aid, right? And a lot of times, these shots, so say you feed a marginal nutrition program, and then you have to do some of these treatment type solutions, it is going to be more expensive than following a more holistic approach up front. And what?
Can you repeat that?
We did both. We did blood and live liver biopsies. It was not that reasonable. I had to do intensive biopsies. And there was a huge difference.
And did you find a deficiency?
Not in the blood, but
In the liver biopsy? Yeah.
And liver is better because that's more of a long-term indicator, where blood is very short-term in the moment.
One cow with a grandmother was going downhill, so they both blood. They came back like 2 days later, died. So they said the liver should be and it did show up.
And I think a lot of times if you are going to take the route of looking at the animal's status, do soil samples, do forage samples, talk to your local extension group, because you're gonna have to find out where does this problem stem from, right? To ultimately have a proper holistic solution to the problem. Where do they send them off to? Yeah. Is it vets? Would they do it?
Well,
I think if an animal dies,
Yeah.
That one's easy, at least to deal with. Right? I think just one thing I was going to add with the liver versus blood conversation, I think it ties in very well to the concept we're talking about. Like, are we talking extremely deficient, or are we talking like this minute subclinical starting to be deficient? It's really difficult to see when an animal's starting to become deficient. It's not very obvious as far as symptoms. If we talk like slight copper deficiencies, we might not see extreme open rates and pregnancy issues.
Might
but
be
you're
subtle
starting-
losses.
It's subtle losses. So I think it's just one of those things that you think about. Do we wait until we see an extreme issue where it's very clear and evident and we have dead animals? Or is it, we need to start thinking about the subclinical things that we can't necessarily see very clearly and obviously, but we know that there's probably and it's not just mineral, it could be anything. It could be vitamin levels, it could be anything. It's just something I think we should think about.
Hi, I was just going to speak to Clayton's question a little bit. So I totally agree with the slide thing. It's something that when we go to the pricing, we don't often look at. We also don't look at if you're AIing and you're really punching sex semen, Because if you want to make a difference right off the hop, you got a 40-cent increase on having males, right? So there are variables that we can control, but let's throw the weight out of the equation. You're saying 2% increase, all other things are equal to your question, which is there are other things that cause poor growth rates and poor infertility, so poor fertility or reproduction rates. But what she's saying is all other things equal, we're looking at a 2% gain, and we're looking at a 3% improvement in reproduction efficiencies. So what I would suggest, Clayton, is we throw that number out. Those extra 25 pounds, whether they're 10 cents a difference at the auction mart or not, that's not your game changer. Your game changer is you get 3 extra calves. So let's do that math. How much more, I don't care if it's Blueprint or I don't even think New Rosedale has a 100% chelated, but so let's not talk about places. Let's talk about, if we get 3 more calves, let's do an easy $2,000, okay? So we got 6,000 bucks. If we are feeding on 100 cows, if we are feeding, let's say we're doing, well, just for easy math, it's gonna be over a bag a week, okay? So I'm feeding a bag a week, so 52 bags of feed. This is easy math, so it's slightly under consumption. Okay, sometimes we can force it. Sometimes we're on salt pasture where consumption is going to be less. So we're going to just say, for easy math, 52 bags is the difference. What's the math on 52 bags for an increase of inorganic versus organic?
But you have to double the cost.
That's my question. So are you saying $25 more a bag to get chelation? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it'd be 100 bags in total for 100 cows, because a cow eats about a bag a year, right?
That's what I'm saying. We could double it, sure. Okay, fine. What's the difference between the chelated versus the non-chelated? Because we got $6,000 to put it against, no gain. We're not talking about the gain. We're talking about the 3% efficiency in reproduction. So I only am talking about 3 calves on those 100 cows.
$3,000 difference in the mineral.
Okay, so we're making $6,000 from our 3 extra calves if we're going to talk price at all, and it's costing us $3,000. So I'll take my $3,000, is what I'm saying.
On 100
If, on 100 cows, that's $3,000 per 100.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, we do need to work and make sure that we're using liver biopsies, and I'm sure Deanne and some other vets that might be here can talk to that, for sure. But another thing I would suggest is when we're talking about, instead of a biopsy that just pokes all around in the liver, take a cull cow if she's reflective of your feeding program, and when she gets harvested, keep one back, grind her for burger or stew meat, and donate it if you need to get a reflective mineral amount of numbers out of that actual liver. Okay? So you have that opportunity. Have them hold the liver and send it off. I think it's $52 a sample in Saskatoon. Oh, it's 50 here, it's 75 in Saskatchewan. Send it wherever you want. My point is, have them hold it. So that way you get actual numbers back that you're looking at, and she, especially if she's maybe she slipped on the ice and she broke the leg. Maybe, if she's your 4-year-old, but you had to harvest her, she's reflective of your feeding program of the last 4 years. Actually 5, if we include what you spoke to, which was the embryonic changes that we see with a good mineral pack. So I don't disagree with you, Clayton. We have to make it profitable, but I do think it's important that instead of looking at the pounds and fighting over a 5-cent or 10-cent slide, that we actually look at, if we truly, all other things equal, we change nothing in our management other than this. If your contention is I get a 3%, I got 3 extra calves. And at calf prices now, it makes a difference. Calf prices at 90 cents in 05 or 06 or after BSC or whatever, maybe not so much. But that was I just thought I'd make a comment. I don't disagree with you, but I think we need to look at it from both perspectives.
But we just got to show the cost of stuff.
Absolutely.
If I can grow 60 bushel canola, but what's it going to cost you to grow it? And you never ever see this.
I 100%. That's why I don't disagree with you. We need to work that slide in. But the truth is, it's less about that 10 cents on the 25-pound gain, even if it's 10 cents, which probably isn't quite. But it's more about what you started with, which is the reproductive efficiencies. All things equal, we get 3 more calves per 100 cows. So that's the number that is the moneymaker in this kind of an environment
the weaning weight, less treatments if you have a sick calf is going to be the cherry on top.
I found it really informative to have the immunoglobulin levels. I think that's really important because if we're in confinement and we're pushing the envelope to get bigger calves and we've got that cocci threat or whatever other threat we have, I really like that. Now, I don't know what that translates to, and I don't know if anybody in this room does. So, I mean, yeah, we had 400 more units, but what does that actually mean? Do we get one less sick calf? I don't know. If you have data on that, that's helpful. It too is icing on the cake. But I just wanted to make the point that it really, for us, in the system, it's less about the 10 cents and it's more about the extra calf. Or the calf we don't have to treat consistently. If you can prove that, if that 400 translates.
And that is very important, is ask for data, ask for product-specific research and data, ask maybe who's using it in your area and what their experiences is. I think where we get burned sometimes as producers is we try stuff that comes around and maybe it's not backed up by science. Maybe it is a more expensive program, but it's not 100% what we thought it's going to be. So ask the hard questions. I think if we go to breeders and we buy replacement heifers, we ask the genetics, we really look into it. But do you do the same when you go to your supplier and ask them exactly, oh, my trace minerals, is it inorganic, is it organic? What percentage is organic? Yeah. But I think many of us don't. But yeah. And
because they don't even know where their tags are half the time. When I ask for a tag to do a ration, maybe I'll go and try to find one. They've never looked at a tag, so they
yeah. Or what's your forage status? I think as producers, if we take a lot of interest in all of these different things that can impact our overall herd health, then we can be more specific with what we can probably get away with doing or not doing. But in the end of the day, hold the suppliers, hold us accountable, ask for product-specific research and recommendations and what we see in the local areas.
On your studies, like let's say 3%, was that cattle on no mineral thing?
No.
They were on a cheaper.
All my studies that I will show you is always high levels of inorganic, which is typical of most of the tags, compared to much lower of organics only. Because what I'm trying to do is shrink that cost difference.
I'm totally going to be off the track here because I'm going to say, what if we want to be less? What if we want to do less hands-on? What if you wanted to say, I want to raise cattle using the least inputs I can. I want everything to be more natural. It makes me think, I know we've improved cattle breeding over time, but what are we even doing trying to graze cattle here then? If we say we're short of selenium, we're short of things. So what was our expectation of the wild animals to live here? Like say buffalo were grazing here. Was it realistic that they calved every 2 years? Did they have like 40%? Like I don't know.
You're forgetting that they had the opportunity to select and graze what they needed.
And to travel wherever they need to.
They weren't confined. We as humans have changed their grazing habits, and so we have not allowed them to selectively graze what they need when they need it. That's the difference.
Okay, that's the difference because I know when Clayton's talking too about no monocultures, good mixtures, we should be having better grass and all that. But yeah, okay, I just thought, should we even be here?
That would be.
That's why land is cheap here.
Anyway, just for the sake of time, I want to try to keep things on track, and I appreciate all the questions. It's very good to have these kind of discussions.
Absolutely.
And bring forth, questions and opportunities to improve all the time. That's why we put these on in the first place. So with that, I want to really thank Alltech for bringing up Laurentia all the way from Florida to a Manitoba winter.